All right. I think everyone is in at the moment, and hopefully everyone's can hear us. If you can't, send us a quick message on the chat. But first of all, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our info session for our SQL for Data Analysis Certificate course. My name is Michaela Mora. I work with Data Institute certificate programs here at the University of San Francisco. And before we get started, I wanted to make a quick, couple of quick announcements / requests. If your Zoom display name doesn't match the name you use to RSVP for the event, please update your display names just so we can track who's attending. And you can do this by, finding yourself on video, clicking the 3 dots, and then next to your face or your name, and then just selecting rename. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me in the chat as well. You're also welcome to turn on your video or keep your video on if you feel comfortable doing so. If not, that's totally fine, but I will ask everyone to remain on mute for the time being. If you have any questions throughout the session, please, again, drop them into the chat, and we'll either answer those in real time or towards at specific points in the session. And so now I am going to hand it over to our instructor for SQL for Data Analysis, Tim Lee, who will tell you more about himself and our course.
Great, thanks. So before we start, just because it's wonderful web conferencing, does anybody have any audio issues? Can everybody hear me? I'm looking at chat right now, so if anybody has some issues with the audio or anything, just let me know. Just wait a minute, see if anything pops up. Though I realize if you have problems with the audio, you wouldn't hear me to tell you to type anything. Here, let me type something right now. Okay, so let's get started. We're gonna just go over an overview of SQL for data analysis. Our overall agenda is this. I'll introduce myself. We'll talk a little bit about first what the topic is, like what is SQL if you've never heard of it. Maybe you've heard other people or other groups in your company use it. We'll talk a little bit about what it is, what it isn't, and then we'll talk more about the structure of the class, how we're gonna go about teaching it, especially in this remote format. So my name's Tim, and here's a little bit about my background. I started off actually in mechanical engineering with very little computer experience. And then I worked in consulting as a finance and analytics manager, where I actually taught myself SQL and Excel and all those lovely Microsoft technologies. I did that for a couple of years, and then I pivoted into data science, and that's been the last three or four different positions that I've had. But through all this whole journey of mine, I've used SQL database to store time series data, flight data, financial data, cybersecurity data. I've always used SQL stuff for a lot of analysis that I do and a lot of work that I do. And currently, just if you're wondering, I work at Workday as a machine learning engineer. We make recommender systems and other stuff for people that use our HR system. And that's what I currently work on right now. So let's talk a little bit about SQL. So SQL, I actually worked with someone that kept calling it SQL, and the common way to say it is actually sequel. Like, there's a movie, they make another one, it's called the sequel. You could also say SQL, but it's a kind of a mouthful and people will look at you a little weird, but yeah, so SQL is the way to do it. And it's the most common tool for accessing structured data. So usually what you'll use SQL for is accessing data that is too large for one computer. It doesn't fit on your desktop. It doesn't fit on your laptop. Or if that same core data set needs to be accessed by multiple people. It's kind of like a system of record. Many companies will have like your master revenue table or master customer table that a lot of different people need to access, and everyone will use SQL to pull from one source of truth or one, correct data set. And that's the tool that we're going to be learning. So we're not learning how to store the data, and we're not learning so much how to do the plots and that kind of stuff, but we're learning how to pull it out of this big pool of a database and get it ready for, downstream Excel, Python, or Tableau. And that's what SQL is. So like I said, it's used for cleaning and manipulating data. A lot of those dashboards that you'll see, a lot of plots that you'll see that are constantly updated on websites. Even when you go to say something like your credit card bill and it has like little bar charts about how much money you spend, in my case, all on coffee, those are often generated by SQL in the back end. So SQL is everywhere, you just don't know it. It powers a lot of charts and a lot of reporting. And it's not quite like Python, C++, or Java. Like usually with those, you'll have functions, you'll have loops, you'll make full programs, you'll design websites. And SQL is just designed for manipulating data, doing simple calculations, value formatting, looking for particular rows. So it's not quite like these other programming languages. Just to let you know, SQL is a agreed upon standard, but a lot of companies have extended it. So I would say 90% of SQL is the same across all these different variants that you might see. And these are different brands. Amazon has their own version. MySQL is one of the legacy ones. A lot of companies that I've worked at use the Microsoft or the Oracle one. And I would say 90% of all the commands are the same in all of these, but each one of these has some additional advanced functionality that they use for their purposes. Oracle is designed around finance. MySQL was designed just to be more flexible, so they have a few more general functions. Amazon Redshift is designed to be more cloud-oriented, so they have some special functions that kind of optimize for that. But you might see these different terms, and what you'll be learning in this class will be applicable to all these variants. We try very hard to only teach what's common between all of these. And the one we'll be using in this course is Postgres. So if you've heard about it, this is the one we'll be using to do most of our teaching. And like I said, we'll be teaching the core syntax. That's the same in all the different variants. So let's talk about how it's used. You would typically turn to SQL if you're in these groups. Marketing uses a lot. I've worked on many marketing projects. I've worked on a lot of finance projects. People operations, when you want to know about headcounts, teams, sales forces, they will all use SQL to generate reports to understand, large organizations or a lot of behavior. And they'll answer questions like, what's the country where we have the most sales? How many new customers visited this website? Of all the weekend promos that we offered just this last Labor Day, what kind of deals were the most successful? And what they'll do is take these questions, look at what type of things they're recording, and then use SQL to arrange it in such a way that they can make powerful reports. You'll get conversion rates, you'll get how much profit you're making, and that's the idea, and that's the mindset that SQL kind of addresses. So personally for me, how I use SQL day to day is the same thing. I ask questions about a large data set, use SQL to inform decisions, and then I look at trends, I look at summaries, and I look at counts. And even with advanced AI research, there's always a SQL database somewhere holding those training examples, understanding how many images of cats and dogs are being classified, and looking at and storing different text comments that Facebook might have. There's always SQL somewhere in the background. So SQL is a great way to start getting into the whole data industry, so to speak, and understanding analytics, and start to build your career and building a great skill set. So overall, that's a little bit about SQL. So I'm going to pause right here, and we'll talk about the class structure next. But any questions about just what SQL is, what it might be used for, anything about this particular technology or skill? All right. Silence is a yes. I mean, silence is no questions. Take that back. Okay, so the course objectives. This is an entry-level course. We don't expect you to understand a whole lot. This is designed for people that might have heard about it. You might work on spreadsheets, and you want to learn how to make reports. You want to start accessing the database. Or this is for you if your boss is tired of you asking someone else to pull the report, and he wants you to learn how to design them and pull them yourselves. So we are not teaching what's called database administration, which is you're not there going into companies, buying huge amounts of hardware, installing the software and then you're like Mr. Data master, right? You know, you're the one that controls everything from scratch. This is more from a user standpoint. We are aiming this towards people where a database already exists in your company or, you know, for yourself, and you just need to learn how to access and use what someone else has already set up. We're also not heavily teaching the tuning or optimization. There's a whole specialty to make sure that if there's a report that's really important and it's expensive, you have to do some design elements to make sure that it runs quickly every time you call it. And let's say you call it, you know, 10 times every hour. There's a whole specialty in making sure that it runs under 10 seconds. So we'll talk a little bit about this, but this isn't the main purpose of the course. We're here to make sure that people can make reports and that you can start learning the base skills to access data. So here's a quick overview of some of the things we'll be teaching. Extraction commands, filtering, learning how to manipulate strings, learning how to do math stuff, as you can imagine. Looking at time series stuff, you'll need to add, subtract, do averages, do comparisons. We'll learn about how to assemble different types of data. Let's say you have a sales table and you'll have time series related stuff. You want to understand sales over time, you have to match the two data sets together. And there's a lot of different ways of doing that. So there's a lot of complicated stuff in there. We'll learn about logic flow, how to add different case whens or if and thens. We'll learn about nested queries. And if you don't know what that is, then join our class and we'll teach you. We'll learn about data types and we'll learn about aggregations. Averages, sums, those are examples of aggregations over subgroups. So we are learning a language. It's not like Python, but it is still considered a computer language. So each week we'll have a short review. We'll have a lecture with some breaks. Currently I'm rejiggering the current content so it's more Zoom friendly. I know everyone gets Zoom fatigue, so we're trying to make the lectures broken up as much as possible with some interactive stuff in between. And near the tail end, we'll have exercise time and Q&A. So there'll be some like labs to work on to make sure you have some hands-on experience, because everyone will be in front of the computer. And everybody that does sign up will get the textbook, which is data management, or getting punched in the face by SQL and pandas, written by the lovely Nick Ross. And a lot of the lectures that we'll be teaching will actually parallel the textbook. So the idea is we're going to go through this together, go through all the different commands, answer questions, and then, you know, 1 month in the future, you can't quite remember what you learned. You'll always have a reference to go back and look at the book, and we'll be using a lot of examples from the book. So you'll always have that reference in case, you know, you need to go back and look something. Also in this book is homework problems, and that's where the homework will be coming from. And, you know, we'll also give out answers as we go through the course, so you can always check your work and understand, you know, what the right thing to do is. Okay. So here's the 8 weeks. Week 1 is going to be a lot of introductions, making sure everyone's internet connection's okay. And we're actually, like we said, having labs. So week 1 will, if you're really tech savvy and everything works out great, should be short. But for those of you that might have technical issues, we'll spend some time and have office hours to make sure that you're all set up. You can access all the databases and data sets that we'll be using, and that you'll be able to do the homework. So that's week 1. And then the rest of the lessons lay out like this. I just wanted to highlight that we're going to take 2 kind of practical lessons in week 5 and week 7. So the idea behind a case study is we will go over a topic, start with the data, you know, just a big database, and kind of walk through what a typical company would do. We'll use everything that we've learned before, but we'll do it from a practical standpoint. Say, let's build a real report together, and we'll actually leverage all the things we've learned. And there's 2 weeks of that where we'll spend the whole time just walking through a case step by step by step. And in the previous, you know, in-person courses, we would have more quizzes and tests, but instead in week 8, we're going to go over some advanced topics, which we will lightly talk about some of the optimizations, some of the database administration, and some of the advanced functions. So it's more background stuff that will help you just understand more of the tech world and a little bit about how to interact with your company's, you know, tech environment. Okay. So class expectations. If you decide to take this course, we do have a few expectations for you. One is that you have some experience using an Excel sheet to calculate how much money you spent on coffee or on Amazon shipping. Ideally, you've used a spreadsheet to do some simple formulas. You've used Google Sheets to track, how much money you spent on vacation and split it between friends, or maybe you used it like address book. Ideally, some familiarity with a spreadsheet light format with table and rows. And each week, it's expected that you guys work through the homework that we're going to assign, and that you'll practice all the commands. SQL doesn't have actually that many commands to learn, but the way you really get it as a natural one is you do a lot of practice. Also, attendance. So attendance, we're actually going to track over the 8-week course. If there's anything that comes out, you can reach out to Leslie, who's going to be our course admin. 2 absences are allowed if you still want the certificate, but for one of them, homework must be turned in. Otherwise, homework is just there for you guys to make sure you have your practice. If there's time zone or other exceptions, please reach out ahead of time, or whatever happens to Leslie and myself, and let us know what's happening. As stated, we have labs, so anybody that attends this course requires a computer with internet access, and you're going to need to be able to install a lightweight SQL client. So if you're using a computer that's provided from work, make sure that you have the ability to install stuff on your computer. We will send out an earlier email of what needs to be installed with some basic instructions. And so make sure you check with your IT people if if you have permissions, and we'll definitely have time to troubleshoot some of that the first week. But make sure you keep that in mind. Okay. Any questions about the class?
Tim, I think there was an earlier question submitted. Can you answer what are other alternatives for SQL?
Yeah, all right. So yeah, I'm looking at alternatives to SQL. It's a tricky question because it depends on, I'm assuming most of you guys are going to be using this at work, or you're thinking about using it in a future job. It really depends on what the company has. Some companies have what's called NoSQL, and essentially it's a different way of storing data. So that's also another way of storing it, and it's a little more cumbersome, and you usually are. It requires more expertise in computer science to really pull the data out, because once you pull it out, you have to kind of like really manipulate it to get it into a standard format. SQL, which is the structured one, you'll see it acts a lot like a Excel sheet. So it always has to have certain fields, and every row has that field, but that's not the case in NoSQL. So that'd be an example of NoSQL. There's another question. Can we use a Mac for this course? Yes, we will have installation instructions for both Mac and Windows. So we will have the clients for that. And one of the great things about SQL is it's not tied to a Windows or Linux or Mac platform. The database is run independently, so all you need on your computer is a Windows or a Mac-oriented client, kind of like if you think about Chrome, right? Chrome is on both Mac and Windows to connect to the database, and then you can run from there. Is this class truly for people who have no experience with SQL? Yes, we are starting right at Select Star, if you guys know anything like that. So we'll be talking about that. And we'll definitely have the book there too. If you feel like we're going too fast, always go over the lesson again. And again, if you work on the homework, I guarantee that will help a lot. Any other vocal questions or typed questions? I see a raised hand.
I had a question.
Sure.
I was wondering to what extent we'll be working on real world data sets versus doing like little theoretical syntax practice problems.
Oh yeah, so we will be working on stock data, some car registration data. I'm actually trying to prep some Yelp data, but there is some licensing things that we have to work around. A lot of the cooler data sets usually have some specific agreements you have to say, like you can't make money with them, and this is a little tricky. So that's why a lot of the fun ones that I actually have, I can't use because you guys are actually paying for the course. So we have some set ones. I'm trying to find some new ones, but yeah, we will be using real data. They'll have millions of rows. So it's not like you're only working with 10. Some of these are about 10 million or at least 5 million rows. So it's a good amount of data. Yeah.
And that'll be right from the beginning or just towards
Yeah,
the end?
yeah. So what's going to happen in the background is I'm actually going to set up a Amazon database, cloud database. So you're not actually installing on your computer. All the data is going to live in the cloud, and all you're going to do is connect to Amazon. And that Amazon database is going to be funded by this course. It comes out of the budget. So you guys just, pull data and make reports to your heart's content. So that's why even for the homework, you'll need to connect via internet. You won't be able to do it just on your computer.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Sure.
Can you use a different software? Like we have Microsoft SQL Server Management or something. Could we use that instead of the other SQL software?
So, like I said, this will be probably a separate question. I'll say it depends. And we'll take this offline. So there's a few things we can try. And if you can connect to the database, then maybe it'll work. So, but we'll do that one as a one-off. It might work, it might not. I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the one thing you can check is it will be hosted on Amazon. So you might Google around for that. I can check that too, which is if your SQL Server client can connect to an Amazon database. I think it also depends on the version. Some of the new ones have plugins and drivers for, all different varieties. And if it's too old, it may not work. If it's newer, it might. Yes, we will have weekly office hours. So going back quickly to just what weekly, there's two ways to kind of like get in touch with me. One is we're not planning to actually lecture the full 2.5 hours. I know you love me, but I will do my best to cut that down and try to keep it to about half of that so that there's plenty of Q&A time and there's office hours after that. And I will have some ad hoc office hours during the week too, depending on people's availability. We'll take a poll the first week to see what kind of time works for everyone. I have a job too, so it'll generally be either at lunchtime or in the evenings. And if you guys have any questions or you just want to ask me about SQL or data stuff in general, I'm always happy to talk about that. Yeah, hopefully that answers that question. All right, I see another raised hand. Alicia?
Hi, Tim. This is Alicia. What was the learning about different data types and indexing on the different fields? Or is it really just the database is already set up with all the tables and we're just learning how to query the table?
So we will learn definitely about data types because that will affect whether you can add stuff. Like there's a difference between the number one and the text version of one. So that we're definitely going to cover that. And the indexing, we're not going to do like a full exercise thing because it's a little harder to do, but we will talk about it on the last week, which is different types of indexing, when do you do it, why you should do it, and why it's important. Unless you had something more specific you're asking about, like explain plans or something else.
Oh, maybe about setting up primary keys to make sure
Oh, yeah.
Or what?
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about that.
And optimization.
And we will also probably continuously, at least for the first 4 weeks, start collecting questions about things that you guys want to cover. Because that last week is really, I have some ideas, but it's really a fill-all week for any other questions you guys might have. I've set up a lot of databases both in Microsoft and non-Microsoft environments for different companies. So I can cover whichever topics you guys are most interested in. So that's definitely flexible.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. What is CTE and will it be covered in the course? I'm not familiar with that acronym, but I can look it up and get back to you on that one. Unless you know what it stands for, Vina?
Tim, I could be wrong, but I think it's common table expression. Does that sound right?
Common table expression. I'll have to look it up. I'm probably sure I'll be familiar with it, but I don't know it under that particular term. I'll check it up and then I'll see. Yeah, I'm not familiar with that term. I'm sorry. Okay, any other questions? These are all good. If you guys are really hungry for it, we can talk about different ways of doing nested queries. We can talk a little bit about views. We can talk about materialized stuff with commands. One of the things, just so that everyone is aware, there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do, but this is actually, when we go back to this slide, a lot of that cool stuff will actually be dependent on what database you're accessing. So if we teach this stuff, it may not necessarily be applicable to everyone, especially at some of the more advanced stuff.
I had a question, if I may.
Yeah.
To what extent will the data we're working with be somehow confidential or, okay, my real question is, could we blog about our learning experience or like demo things that we've done to basically make it more obvious to a prospective employer that like, I know how to use SQL and in this way, or would there be restrictions on that kind of sharing?
I'll double check all the data sets, but in general, if they're, I think one of them stock data from like 2010, 10 years ago, and then another one's car registrations, which is public record. I'll check with the other ones too, but I don't think there should be too much of an issue on those.
Awesome, thank you.
But I mean, usually with blogging, you can show your queries, but if they don't have access to the database, I mean, it's not going to matter to them.
And there's no objection from you or from USF about us describing our learning experience in the course? No. Awesome, cool, thank you.
All good questions. One stumper, which is good.
Are there any questions about logistics that anyone has, or perhaps application, anything in that realm? So the application process is pretty, it's pretty straightforward. We can, what we'll do after this session is send out an email with the link to apply for those of you that haven't already applied. It's a quick, maybe like less than 3-minute long application to fill out on our website. And we usually can notify you within a couple days of your application. And from there, you submit payment and you're enrolled in the course. You'll receive communication from either me, I'm Michaela, or Leslie Blakeman, who's waving her hand. And it's, yeah, it's really relatively straightforward. There are no prerequisites because it's, like Tim mentioned, it's a beginner level course. So as long as you have access to a computer and an interest in learning SQL, you're a good fit. And then something else Tim mentioned that I just want to reiterate in case there were any latecomers, or if anyone missed it for whatever reason. Homework is self-graded. This isn't, you're not going to get graded on a normal letter grade scale. It will be pass-fail. And that's based on attendance, essentially. So students are allowed 2 absences, at least. If you miss 2, at least one of them, you'll need to watch the session video from that particular session and submit the homework assignment to Tim, just to essentially show that you were there, even if you were there a little bit late. We do recommend that you attend all of the sessions, just so you can take part in any of the activities, any of the discussions. But if, again, there are any extenuating circumstances that might prevent you from attending the minimum number required, such as travel plans, or not that too many people are traveling right now anyway, but if there's a time zone difference, just reach out to us and we can talk further. All right, well, if there's nothing else, then we can let you all get back to your regular evening. If anyone thinks of any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. You can email Leslie and I at datainstitute@usfca.edu. If you have something specific for Tim about the course content, we're more than happy to pass that information along to him. And like I said, we'll send a follow-up email shortly with some helpful links. And thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you in class this fall.